That debris clogs the intake manifolds.
I sealed them, but we are stuck here until we can clear that debris.
The woman who saved Star Trek thought it was a show about traveling entertainers performing for the troops. That's the thing. Lucille Ball, the most powerful woman in American television, the co-owner of the studio that produced the show, the person without whom Star Trek would never have made it past a rejected pilot, reportedly had no idea what she was actually financing. She thought it had something to do with a USO tour, a comedy legend, backing a science fiction epic based entirely on the instinct that it was worth doing. She was right. Against NBC's skepticism, against her own board of directors, against every conventional piece of wisdom about what television audiences would and wouldn't sit through, Star Trek made it onto the air. And what happened after that changed television, science, culture, and the future itself. Today, 12 hidden details behind the show that went where no television had gone before. Some of these will surprise you. One of them will change how you think about every career decision you've ever made. And the one we close on explains why. Nearly 60 years later, this show is still not finished. Let's count it down. 12. NBC called the first pilot too cerebral and ordered another one anyway. In the entire history of American network television, there are almost no examples of a network rejecting a pilot and then funding a second one from scratch. It essentially doesn't happen. In Hollywood, when a pilot fails, the note is simple. Goodbye, thank you, next. Gene Roddenberry's first Star Trek pilot, titled The Cage, was filmed in late 1964 and screened for NBC executives in early 1965. It starred Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike, a different captain entirely from the Kirk that audiences would eventually meet, alongside Leonard Nimoy as an early version of Spock and a largely different crew. The production cost NBC approximately $630,000. In the network's judgment, it was too slow, too cerebral, too intellectual, and didn't have enough action. They rejected it. And then, in one of the most improbable decisions in television history, they asked for another one. The reason was Lucille Ball. She owned Desilu Productions, the studio producing the show. She had championed the project from the beginning, overriding the objections of her own board of directors to take it on. When NBC rejected the pilot, Ball exercised the leverage that came with being the most powerful independent producer in Hollywood and pushed the network to reconsider. They commissioned a second pilot. Getting a second pilot was, by the account of Desilu VP Herbert Solow, enormously rare. He later said flatly, "If it were not for Lucy, there would be no Star Trek today." The second pilot was produced with a new captain, William Shatner as James T. Kirk, and a reduced budget of $300,000. It was approved. The show was ordered for fall 1966, and the original rejected pilot? It wasn't thrown away. During the first season, when the production fell behind on episode delivery, Roddenberry wrote a framing story around the original Cage footage and turned it into a two-part episode called The Menagerie, the only two-parter in the original series, and one that won a Hugo Award. The pilot that was too cerebral to air became the episode that won science fiction's highest honor. NBC told Roddenberry his idea was too smart for television. The idea eventually won a Hugo Award. 11. Spock's ears almost didn't make it past NBC.
Why, thank you, Captain McCoy.
Of all the things the network objected to in Star Trek's development, the one that sounds strangest in retrospect is this. NBC reportedly had a problem with Mr. Spock's ears. The concern, as it has been documented in multiple production histories, was that Spock's pointed ears looked demonic. The network was anxious about the character appearing too satanic, too reminiscent of the devil, and worried about viewer backlash, particularly from religious audiences. There was reportedly pressure to soften the design, to round the ears, to make the character look less threatening. Roddenberry held firm. Leonard Nimoy, who brought the character to life across 3 seasons and 6 films, has spoken about the process of developing Spock's physicality.
This type of aircraft might be too fragile to take our tractor beam.
The ears, the posture, the deliberate suppression of emotion, as a deeply considered creative act rather than a costume choice. The Vulcan salute, the live long and prosper greeting, the specific way Spock tilted his head when processing something. All of it emerged from Nimoy's thoughtful construction of a being who was genuinely alien, not human with pointy ears. The character that NBC wanted to sand down became the most analyzed, most quoted, most beloved science fiction character in American television history. Spock's specific combination of logic and suppressed emotion, the tension between his Vulcan discipline and his human half, became, for millions of viewers, a framework for thinking about the relationship between reason and feeling in their own lives. And it almost got redesigned because a network executive was worried about his ears. The man who played Spock almost didn't come back.
I'm a little pleased myself. Situation.
Khan is holding our staff.
Leonard Nimoy appeared in both Star Trek pilots. He was one of the only cast members from The Cage who survived the complete overhaul that produced the second version of the show. He brought Spock through 2 pilots, 3 seasons, 6 films, and a legacy that spanned half a century. And yet, after the first season, he had serious doubts about continuing. By the accounts of cast and crew members from the time, Nimoy struggled with the weight of Spock's popularity. The character was consuming his public identity in a way he found difficult. Fan mail arrived by the thousands. Addressed to Spock rather than to Nimoy, people approached him in public and spoke to him as though he were the character. He later wrote a memoir titled I Am Not Spock, a title he eventually revisited with the follow-up decades later called I Am Spock, suggesting his relationship with the character evolved considerably over his lifetime. He also had contract disputes with the studio that made the production process contentious during certain periods of the show's run. The creative tensions between the demands of playing an emotionless character and the emotional realities of a difficult working environment were real. But Nimoy kept coming back, season after season, film after film. The character that had threatened to erase him became, in the end, the thing most worth being remembered for. He reached a peace with Spock that took decades to fully arrive. And when it did, it was visible in every scene he played in his final appearances in the franchise, including the 2009 J.J. Abrams reboot. He spent his career playing a character defined by the tension between logic and emotion. His own life mirrored that tension almost exactly. 9, the show that ran on favors, borrowed sets, and cowboy boots. The original Star Trek ran on a budget that, by the standards of what it was attempting, was almost laughably inadequate. Each episode of the first season cost approximately $190,000. This was not unusual for drama at the time, but Star Trek wasn't drama. It was a science fiction epic set in the 23rd century, requiring alien planets, futuristic technology, spaceship interiors, and a rotating cast of extraterrestrial creatures. The production team had to find ways to make the universe of the 23rd century out of materials from the 1960s, on a budget that left almost no margin. The solutions were ingenious and sometimes absurd. Alien costumes were routinely recycled across episodes. A monster that appeared in one planetary environment would turn up in a completely different one a few episodes later, repainted and repositioned. Sets were borrowed from other productions. The bridge of the USS Enterprise, one of the most iconic television sets in history, was designed by art director Matt Jeffries in a way that could be quickly reconfigured to represent different areas of the ship, minimizing the number of new sets that needed to be built for each episode. Even props had creative afterlives. A Western set on the Desilu lot, built for another production, was used as the basis for episodes requiring Earth-like environments. Cowboys and aliens occasionally shared the same physical infrastructure without anyone needing to know. When the show needed alien plant life, the production team used painted chicken wire and paper. When they needed futuristic terrain, they dressed the hills of Southern California. The 23rd century was built, week after week, from whatever was available at Desilu at the price the show could afford. The ingenuity required to make that work, to make viewers believe in a universe that the budget couldn't actually build, produced some of the most creative problem-solving in the history of television production. The constraints didn't limit the show. They forced it to be smarter. If this is the kind of deep dive into real television history you've been looking for, subscribe. We cover the shows, the people, and the moments that actually changed how we see the world. 8. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. kept Uhura on the Enterprise.
What form of communication?
At some point during the first season of Star Trek, Nichelle Nichols made a decision. She was going to leave. She had been offered a Broadway show. Her lines were being cut. The character she was playing, a communications officer on a starship, felt underwritten, underserved. She described Uhura, in her own words, as a glorified telephone operator in space. She told Gene Roddenberry she was leaving. He asked her to take the weekend before making a final decision. That weekend, Nichols attended an NAACP fundraising event. There, she was told that someone wanted to meet her, a fan of the show who wanted to speak with her personally. She agreed, expecting an ordinary encounter with an enthusiastic viewer. The fan was Martin Luther King Jr. King told Nichols that he and his family were devoted watchers of Star Trek. He told her that Uhura was the first black character on American television who was not defined by a racial stereotype. Not a maid, not a servant, not a comic figure. She was a professional. She sat on the bridge of a spaceship and did her job alongside white crew members as an equal. King told Nichols that she could not leave, that her presence on that bridge was not a television role. It was a statement about the future. For the first time on television, King reportedly told her, "We will be seen as we should be seen, as equals." She went back to Roddenberry on Monday and told him she was staying. She remained for 3 seasons, the animated series, and 6 films. She later recruited for NASA, and her work in that capacity influenced Mae Jemison, the first black female astronaut, who said explicitly that Uhura was the reason she believed she could go to space. A weekend, a chance meeting, a king who watched a science fiction television show, and the future changed. 7. Shatner and Nichols sabotaged the scene on purpose.
Stop trembling.
Try not to think of...
This is the follow-on to the previous story, and it deserves its own entry, because what Nichelle Nichols and William Shatner did on the set of Plato's Stepchildren in 1968 was, in the most precise sense of the word, an act of defiance. The episode required Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura to kiss. The episode was written to give the network an out. The kiss was forced by alien telekinesis, so neither character was choosing it freely, which theoretically made it less confrontational. NBC was still nervous, deeply nervous. They were worried about reactions in southern states specifically, where some affiliates might refuse to air the episode. They ordered the production to shoot 2 versions, one with the kiss and one without. The plan was simple. They would shoot the version with the kiss, and they would shoot a version where Shatner and Nichols turned their heads away at the last moment, preventing the actual lip contact. Then NBC would make a final decision in the editing room. Shatner and Nichols had other ideas. In the takes without the kiss, Shatner reportedly crossed his eyes. He made faces. He rendered every take that didn't include the actual kiss completely unusable. Nichols has confirmed the account. Every attempt to film the sanitized version was deliberately ruined by the 2 actors. NBC was left with footage that contained the kiss and footage that was unusable. They aired the episode with the kiss. It was broadcast on November 22, 1968, and it received very little negative mail. The thing the network had feared did not materialize in the way they'd anticipated. Shatner later said of the moment, "It would not have got done without him insisting on it." 2 actors, 1 episode. The network's worst fears didn't come to pass, and the kiss that almost didn't make it to air became one of the most referenced moments in the show's history. 6. The fan letters that refused to let the show die. By the end of Season 2, Star Trek's future was genuinely in doubt. The ratings had been disappointing. NBC was preparing to cancel it. The show had cost the network considerable money for returns that the network considered insufficient. Then, something happened that television had essentially never seen before. Letters arrived. Not in the hundreds, not in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands. NBC received somewhere between 115,000 and 116,000 letters during the campaign to save Star Trek for a 3rd season. Figures that have been cited consistently across multiple production histories. It was, at the time, the largest letter-writing campaign in the history of American broadcast television. The campaign was coordinated largely by a science fiction fan named Bijo Trimble and her husband, who worked with Roddenberry to organize the effort. Science fiction writers, including Harlan Ellison, helped organize the intellectual community around the cause. Caltech and MIT students demonstrated outside NBC's offices. A message went out across science fiction fandom, which in the late 1960s was a community small enough to mobilize quickly and organized enough to act with purpose. NBC buckled. They announced the renewal of Star Trek for a third season while the show was still on the air, an almost unprecedented act of transparency that was itself a response to the public nature of the fan campaign. They even made the announcement during the show. The show was saved. It was not saved by NBC executives having a change of heart. It was not saved by ratings recovering or advertisers rallying. It was saved by fans who decided the show mattered enough to fight for it. The third season was, by most accounts, significantly weaker than the first two. Underfunded, moved to a Friday night death slot, creatively diminished. The show that the fans had fought to keep alive ran for one more season and was canceled anyway. But by that point, it didn't matter. The 3-season run was enough. The syndication engine started, and Star Trek became immortal. 5. The recycled pilot that won science fiction's highest award.
What is it, Mr. Silver?
The first rejected pilot, The Cage, too cerebral, too intellectual, not enough action, was never discarded. It sat in a vault at Desilu, its footage preserved, its potential unrealized. Then, during the first season, the production fell behind on episode delivery. They needed a 2-part episode quickly. The solution was Roddenberry's, and it was elegant. He wrote a framing story around the Cage footage. Spock is put on trial for violating Starfleet orders by taking the injured Captain Pike, now severely disabled, back to the planet where Pike had once been held captive by aliens who could create perfect illusions. The trial allows the audience to see the original pilot footage as flashback, integrated into a new narrative with the current cast. The rejected pilot became the dramatic backbone of a new episode. The Menagerie won the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation in 1967. Science fiction's equivalent of the Oscars. It remains one of only 2 Hugo Awards ever given to an individual Star Trek episode. Think about what that means. The footage NBC called too cerebral, the footage that was rejected outright, that was supposed to disappear, was repurposed, reframed, and honored by the science fiction community as the best dramatic science fiction of its year. The thing they threw away became a prize-winning work of art. Sometimes the rejected thing is the most valuable thing in the room. 4. Gene Roddenberry used space to say what television couldn't say directly.
What worries me is the easy way his counterpart fitted into that other universe.
Gene Roddenberry had a specific theory about what Star Trek could do that ordinary television couldn't, and he was explicit about it in memos, interviews, and conversations with writers throughout the show's run. The theory was simple: set the story far enough away, and you can say anything. Television in 1966 operated under significant constraints. Race was a subject that networks avoided in ways that reflected the political realities of the country. The Civil Rights Act had been signed just 2 years earlier, and the wounds of that struggle were nowhere near healed. The Vietnam War was escalating, but direct criticism of American military policy on network television was essentially impossible. Questions about gender, power, capitalism, religion, all of it sat in territory that the networks preferred to leave undisturbed. Space, it turned out, was far enough away. On a planet in the 23rd century, you could stage an allegory about racial prejudice with aliens who were half black and half white on opposite sides, and get it on the air. You could tell a story about the costs of blind obedience to authority. You could show a black woman and a white captain as professional equals on a bridge at the center of the frame. You could question what civilization actually means, what progress actually costs, what humanity is actually capable of at its worst and its best. The censors had trouble objecting to things that were happening on made-up planets. Roddenberry understood this. He brought in writers, including Theodore Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, Dorothy Fontana, who understood it too. The show became, across its best episodes, one of the most politically engaged pieces of television on American airwaves. And it did it under cover of rubber aliens and papier-mâché rocks. It was, in the truest sense, subversive television. hiding in plain sight on NBC on Thursday nights. 3. The theme song composer got cheated out of royalties.
Are you out of your fucking mind? No.
The Star Trek theme music, that sweeping, dramatic, unmistakable melody, was composed by Alexander Courage for the series premiere in 1966. It became one of the most recognized theme compositions in television history, played in thousands of broadcasts across decades of airings and re-releases. Courage earned royalties every time the theme aired. And here is where things get complicated. Gene Roddenberry wrote lyrics to the Star Trek theme, not lyrics that were ever performed or broadcast or heard by any audience, just words written to the melody, existing on paper. Under the standard music publishing contracts of the era, the author of lyrics to a composition shared in the publishing royalties generated by that composition. By writing lyrics, even unused, unperformed lyrics, Roddenberry was entitled to half of the royalties that Courage earned every time the theme played. Courage later learned what had happened. He described his feelings about it in terms that left little room for ambiguity about how betrayed he felt. He continued to work in television and film, but his relationship with Roddenberry was never the same. The theme that opens every episode of Star Trek, that tells you before a single image appears that you are about to enter a specific and extraordinary universe, was composed by a man who earned half the royalties he should have earned for it for the rest of his life. The story is a reminder that the distance between artistic vision and business practice can be considerable, and that the same person can be responsible for both the greatest creative instincts and the least admirable personal ones. 2. The franchise that refused to stay dead.
What happened? I took a flop.
NBC canceled Star Trek on June 3, 1969, citing poor ratings, excessive costs, and a late-night Friday time slot that had guaranteed minimal viewership. The show was over. 3 seasons, 79 episodes, done. What followed is one of the most remarkable second lives in the history of American popular culture. The episodes went into syndication, and in syndication, something unexpected happened. The show found audiences that had never watched it during its original run, larger audiences in many cases than it had attracted on NBC. The ratings in reruns climbed. The fanbase, which had organized with such discipline to save the show for a 3rd season, didn't dissolve after cancellation. It grew. Fan clubs multiplied. Conventions began. Star Trek conventions, which started as small gatherings of a few hundred people, were drawing tens of thousands of attendees by the mid-1970s. NBC's own accounting department began noticing the syndication revenue. Paramount, which had absorbed Desilu, began receiving fan mail in quantities that required dedicated staff to manage. Writers including D.C. Fontana were reporting to the fanzine Starborn in 1972 that the network and studio were both receiving sustained, high-volume mail about the possibility of a Star Trek return. In 1979, 10 years after cancellation, Star Trek: The Motion Picture opened in theaters. It was followed by 5 more original cast films, then The Next Generation, then Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, and beyond. A franchise that was canceled for poor ratings in 1969 became, across the following half-century, one of the highest-grossing entertainment properties in history. Nobody in 1969 saw that coming. That is the point. The people at NBC who canceled it didn't see it. The advertisers who declined to support it didn't see it. Even the fans who loved it probably didn't see it in full. The only person who might have seen it was Gene Roddenberry, who kept saying, even after cancellation, even in the lean years of the early 1970s, that the show had reached people in ways that ordinary television hadn't, and that it wasn't finished yet. He was right, and it still isn't. 1. What Star Trek was actually saying. And here is the thing that sits underneath every episode, every film, every convention, every tribute, every child who grew up watching it and felt something shift in them that they couldn't quite name. Star Trek premiered on September 8, 1966. The Civil Rights Act had been signed 2 years earlier. The Vietnam War was escalating. American cities were burning in protest. The Cold War was at its height. The entire architecture of human civilization seemed to be held together by the threat of mutual annihilation. And on NBC on Thursday nights, Gene Roddenberry was showing audiences a future in which none of that had won. Not a perfect future, not a utopia free of conflict, but a future in which a black woman sat on the bridge of a starship and held a position of professional authority. A future in which a Russian and an Asian manned the helm together, 3 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and while American soldiers were dying in the Pacific. A future in which a half-alien science officer was valued, not despite his difference, but because of it. A future in which the most powerful tool available to the crew of the Enterprise was not a weapon, but a moral framework, a commitment to exploring rather than conquering, to understanding rather than destroying. The show was saying every week, with alien makeup and cardboard sets, and a budget that barely stretched to the end of the month, we can do better than this. Not we will automatically do better, not things are fine, but we can. The capacity exists. The future is not fixed. Mae Jemison, the first black female astronaut, cited Uhura. Stephen Hawking appeared on The Next Generation because he was a fan of the franchise. Martin Luther King called the show important enough to keep a major actress from leaving. Scientists have named their research stations after elements of the Star Trek universe. The Vulcan salute is recognized in virtually every country on Earth.
You're an overgrown jackrabbit, an elf, a hyperactive thyroid.
That is not what happens to a television show. That is what happens to a mythology. The original series was canceled in 1969. It hasn't stopped yet, because the thing it was saying, the specific, stubborn, unfashionable belief that the future can be better than the present if people choose to make it so, hasn't stopped being true, and it hasn't stopped being necessary. Live long and prosper. It turns out that's not a Vulcan catchphrase. It's an instruction. 12 hidden details, 1 show. And a question that I want to put to you directly. Which iteration of Star Trek do you think has come closest to living up to what the original was trying to do? The original series, The Next Generation, something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one, and this particular debate never gets old. If this kind of deep dive is what you've been looking for, subscribe. There's more ahead.